When we hear the name Adam Smith, we usually think we already know the story. We picture the father of capitalism, the philosopher behind modern markets, the old face placed beside ideas like competition, profit, and self-interest, but that familiar image is too simple. In 1776, when the Wealth of Nations appeared, capitalism did not yet mean what it means today. Smith was not writing a manual for modern corporations. He was not defending a world of giant platforms, speculative finance, or private power quietly writing public rules. He was writing against an older system, a system of kings, merchants, monopoly charters, colonial restrictions, armed companies, and captive markets. The modern myth turns Smith into a saint of profit, but the real story begins with something darker. Before capitalism had a name, monopoly already had an empire. The phrase most attached to Adam Smith is the invisible hand. Today, it is often treated like a magic law. Let individuals chase private gain, and society will somehow produce public good. But this is not the center of Smith's book. The phrase appears only rarely in his surviving work, and only once in The Wealth of Nations. It was later enlarged into a doctrine far bigger than Smith himself. Smith did not believe selfishness always creates prosperity. He knew private interest could fail. He knew merchants could deceive the public. He knew producers could use law to protect themselves from competition. His real target was not the market. His target was monopoly. The dangerous moment came when private profit gained public power. When a royal seal turned one company into the only legal trader. When competition was not beaten in the marketplace but outlawed by the state. To understand Smith, we have to return to 1776. It was a year of fracture. The American colonies were rebelling. The British Empire was under pressure. Atlantic trade was expanding. New machines were beginning to change the meaning of production. In Scotland and England, smoke, steam, credit, empire, and rebellion were not separate stories. They belonged to the same historical moment, but the dominant economic system was not free market capitalism. It was a managed imperial order. Ports were controlled. Colonies were restricted. Trade routes were protected by law and force. Governments tried to decide which goods should move, which ships should carry them, and which merchants should profit. This was the old order Smith entered, a world where national wealth was imagined as treasure, and where commerce was treated as an instrument of state power. Smith was pro-market, but that does not mean he was pro-business in the modern slogan sense. He believed markets could coordinate human effort. He believed exchange could widen prosperity. He believed ordinary people could benefit when trade was open and competition was real. But he was deeply suspicious of merchants and manufacturers when they gathered political power. He warned that their interests were often different from the public interest, sometimes even opposite to it. This is the missing Smith, not the easy symbol used to defend every form of private power, not the cartoon philosopher of greed, but a critic of privilege, capture, and monopoly. So the real question is not whether Smith invented capitalism. The real question is what system he was fighting. And that system had a name: mercantilism. Mercantilism began with a simple mistake. It confused money with wealth. In the mercantile imagination, a nation was rich when it possessed more gold and silver than its rivals. Exports were good because they brought money in. Imports were dangerous because they sent money out. The world became a scoreboard. One nation's gain had to be another nation's loss. This idea shaped policy. Governments built tariff walls, banned foreign goods, subsidized favored industries, and treated trade like a form of warfare. To Smith, this was not wisdom, it was a fallacy with powerful beneficiaries. The consumer paid higher prices, the protected producer gained more profit, and the public was told this was national strength. In Smith's eyes, mercantilism was not just bad economics, it was a machine for turning public policy into private advantage. The colonies were central to this machine. They were not treated as free trading societies, they were built into imperial loops. Raw materials moved toward the imperial center. Manufactured goods moved back out. Ships, ports, and routes were regulated to serve the empire's design. Colonies became captive markets. Smith saw the problem clearly. If consumers were forced to buy from one source and producers were protected from competition, then trade was no longer a natural exchange, it was control. The deeper mistake was the obsession with bullion. Gold and silver were useful, but they were not the same thing as wealth. A pile of coins could sit in a vault while people lacked food, clothing, tools, or shelter. For Smith, a nation was not rich because money was locked away. It was rich when ordinary life was better supplied. Mercantilism survived because it had political machinery. Merchants learned that the greatest profits did not always come from better goods or lower prices. They could also come from better access to power. If a company could gain a monopoly charter, competition disappeared. If it could persuade lawmakers to block foreign goods, consumers had fewer choices. If it could tie colonies to one trade route, prices could be managed from above. This was not the free market. It was privilege written into law. The East India Company became the most dramatic example. It began as a trading corporation with a royal monopoly on Asian trade, but over time, it became something far stranger. A company with ships, soldiers, treaties, tax powers, and territory. A merchant began to look like a sovereign, and that, for Smith, was a warning sign. The East India Company showed what happened when commerce traveled with guns. Goods moved through ports, but behind the goods stood soldiers, forts, and political pressure. The company did not merely buy and sell, it negotiated, fought, ruled, and extracted. In Bengal, after military victory and political control, the company moved from trade into revenue collection. It entered one of India's richest provinces not just as a buyer, but as a power over taxation. Smith saw this fusion as dangerous. A merchant seeks profit. A sovereign is supposed to govern for the public. When one institution tries to be both, the incentives become corrupted. The ledger and the sword should not belong to the same hand, because when profit controls law, trade can become plunder. And when plunder wears the language of commerce, the whole system becomes harder to see. The human cost of monopoly did not stay hidden forever. In Bengal, extraction, mismanagement, and crisis became part of the company's dark record. In Britain, speculation and financial instability exposed another side of the system. The same company that generated private fortunes could also generate public danger. When things went well, gains were concentrated. Executives, shareholders, and connected merchants could profit from monopoly. But when the system cracked, the costs spread outward. Producers suffered. Consumers paid. Taxpayers carried imperial burdens. And when corporate failure threatened wider finance, public rescue became necessary. This is why the story feels modern. Private profit during expansion, public support during collapse. Smith's target was not commerce itself. It was commerce fused with privilege. A system where few gained, many paid, and the language of national greatness hid the transfer. By the time Smith wrote, the mercantile system was cracking. Empire was expensive. Colonies were rebellious. Monopoly corporations were unstable. The old idea of wealth could no longer explain the world being born, so Smith began somewhere else. He redefined wealth. A nation was not wealthy because it had gold and silver in the treasury. It was wealthy because it produced the things people actually needed and used: food, clothing, shelter, tools, transport, security, the daily materials of life. This was a quiet revolution. Smith moved attention away from the king's vault and toward ordinary households, away from imperial treasure and toward the annual produce of land and labor. Wealth was not a pile, it was a flow. And the real test of a society was whether that flow improved ordinary life. If wealth is the flow of useful things, then labor becomes central. For Smith, labor was not background. It was the original source of the goods that sustained society. Fields, docks, workshops, looms, ships, roads, and markets were all connected by human work. But labor could become dramatically more powerful when it was divided. That is why Smith used the famous example of the pin factory. One person trying to make pins alone would produce very little. But if the process was broken into separate tasks, the output changed completely. One worker draws the wire, another straightens it, another cuts it, another sharpens it, another adds the head. No single worker makes the whole pin. But together, through specialization, they produce far more than isolated labor ever could. The lesson was simple and explosive: cooperation creates abundance. Smith identified three forces behind the productivity of divided labor. First, skill improves through repetition. A worker who repeats one task becomes faster and more precise. Second, time is saved. The worker no longer has to keep switching tools, spaces, and mental habits. Third, simple repeated tasks invite machines. This point matters deeply. For Smith, machinery did not appear from nowhere. It often followed the fragmentation of work. Once a task became narrow, repeated, and measurable, someone could imagine a device to do it faster. First, divide the labor, then improve the motion, then mechanize the task. That pattern would become one of the engines of industrial society. But even here, Smith was not blind to danger. The same system that multiplies output can also reduce the worker's world to one tiny motion, repeated again and again. Productivity had a shadow. Smith warned that a person confined to a few simple operations could lose the habit of thinking broadly. The worker might become efficient but mentally narrowed, useful to production but diminished as a human being. This is one reason the real Smith is harder to use as a slogan. He admired the division of labor, but he also feared what it could do to the mind, and he understood another limit. Specialization only works when there is a market large enough to support it. A nail maker in an isolated village cannot survive by producing more nails than anyone nearby can buy. Deep skill needs demand, surplus needs buyers. This is what Smith meant when he argued that the division of labor is limited by the extent of the market. Without a wider market, specialization stops. With a wider market, it deepens. Open ports mattered because they widened the market. A coastal city connected to distant buyers could support more trades, more skills, more workshops, and more specialized labor. Ships were not just carrying goods, they were expanding the possible structure of work. Smith's example of the wool coat shows this beautifully. A simple coat worn by a day laborer looks ordinary, but hidden inside it is a vast network of cooperation. Shepherds, spinners, weavers, dyers, toolmakers, merchants, sailors, and many others all contribute to one object. Most never meet. Many do not even know they are cooperating, yet the coat contains their labor. For Smith, this was the real miracle of markets, not magic selfishness, but invisible cooperation among strangers, made possible by exchange, scale, trust, and law. Smith did not believe poverty was necessary for productivity. He argued that well-paid, healthy, hopeful workers were more energetic and more industrious than desperate ones. A society where wages rise is not weak, it is growing. This matters because it cuts against a cruel old assumption that workers must be kept poor to keep them working. Smith saw something different. A cheerful economy was one where laborers could share in progress, but this required more than markets alone. Exchange needs trust, contracts need enforcement, property needs law, violence and fraud must be restrained. Roads, bridges, ports, schools and courts are not enemies of commerce. They are part of its foundation. Smith's market was not a lawless space floating above society. It depended on justice. Without justice, markets become another word for power. Smith's new political economy replaced hoarding with human productivity. Wealth became a system of labor, exchange, markets, law, and useful goods. And once wealth was defined this way, empire looked very different. If wealth is treasure, empire can appear glorious. It brings gold, colonies, raw materials, and captive markets. But if wealth means the actual supply of life's necessities and conveniences, then empire must be judged by its costs. Who pays for the ships? Who pays for the forts? Who pays for the soldiers, the debts, the wars, and the taxes? Smith looked at the British Empire and saw a pattern. A small group of merchants gained from monopoly. The wider public paid to defend it. This was not national prosperity. It was political capture wearing imperial colors. The American colonial system revealed this logic clearly. Colonial trade restrictions acted like a hidden tax. Colonists could not freely choose their trading partners. They were tied to imperial routes, imperial ships, and imperial rules. The system benefited British merchants, but it limited colonial freedom and raised costs. For Smith, This was not natural commerce, it was control. The same logic appeared in slavery, but in a more brutal form. Smith opposed slavery morally and economically. He saw it as a violation of human dignity. He also argued that enslaved labor was not truly cheap when the full costs of coercion, maintenance, resistance, and poor incentives were considered. Chains destroy labor. Free workers have reasons to improve their condition. Enslaved workers are forced to work under domination. Smith understood that this domination was not only economic, it was psychological. Smith believed slavery persisted partly because of what he called the love of domination. Human beings do not always choose the most efficient system. Sometimes they choose the system that gives them power over others. That is one of Smith's darkest insights. Domination can have its own logic. But Smith's critique also had limits. Later critics would point out that he did not fully center how deeply Atlantic wealth was tied to enslaved labor. Sugar, tobacco, cotton, shipping, insurance, credit, and manufacturing were all connected to the violent extraction of human labor. Smith saw slavery as wrong and inefficient, but he did not fully grasp how central it was to the world economy he was describing. That does not erase his critique. It makes the historical picture more difficult. He saw much of the system, but not all of it. The same difficulty appears in Smith's view of the American settler colonies. He admired their cheap land, their distance from old feudal restrictions, and their rapid agricultural growth. To him, they seemed to show how society could prosper when people had access to land and fewer inherited barriers. But cheap land was not empty land. The prosperity of settler colonies depended on indigenous displacement. Existing forms of land use, sovereignty, and belonging were pushed out of the frame. Smith often treated land as if it became economically meaningful only when Europeans improved it through agriculture. That assumption allowed violence to become less visible. Maps can erase people. A colonial grid can make prior worlds disappear. So, Smith's theory of progress must be read carefully. It reveals one system clearly, while partly hiding another. The rise of modern commercial society was not only a peaceful story of exchange, it also involved displacement in Britain. Older forms of rural life were broken apart by enclosure, game laws, and later clearances. Common access to land, hunting, and subsistence could be restricted or criminalized. People who once survived outside the wage labor market were pushed toward it. This is sometimes called primitive accumulation. It means that markets did not simply emerge because everyone freely chose them. In many places, people first had to be separated from land, tools, rights, and older social protections. The Highland clearances became a stark later example. Communities were uprooted so land could be reorganized for commercial sheep farming. Efficiency displaced memory. The modern economy was built through innovation and exchange, but also through pressure, law, and loss. Smith was not enough. That is not a dismissal. It is the point of taking him seriously. His critique of monopoly, empire, slavery, and producer privilege was powerful. But his framework also carried the blind spots of his world. He helps us see the mercantile system. History asks us to see beyond him too, because systems do not simply disappear, they mutate. The old monopoly charter may no longer be sealed in wax. It may not fly a company flag over a colonial fort, but the logic can survive in new forms. A platform can dominate a market, a patent wall can block entry, a data advantage can become a moat, a lobbying network can shape regulation. The question is not whether monopoly still exists. The question is what mask it wears now. Smith feared business writing public rules, not because he hated business, but because competition disappears when the powerful control the conditions of competition. That danger still exists. Companies may praise open markets when they are small, then build barriers once they become dominant. They may call for freedom when entering an industry, then seek protection after they control it. This is crony capitalism. Markets can be rigged without being formally abolished. Trade wars also revive old mercantilist instincts. The idea that imports are defeat, exports are victory, and national strength requires blocking others has never fully vanished. Smith's warning cuts through this thinking. The real question is not whether a rule sounds patriotic. The question is who benefits from it: consumers, workers, or the producers already closest to power. Smith did not predict artificial intelligence, but he understood a pattern that still matters. First, work is divided into smaller tasks. Then those tasks become repeatable. Then they are measured. Then machines can perform them. In Smith's time, this was visible in the pin factory. Today, it can appear in classification, prediction, translation, moderation, recommendation, and summarization. The division of labor has moved from the hand to the mind. The pin factory has become cognitive. This can create enormous productivity. It can also create new forms of dependency and invisibility. People label data, moderate content, perform microtasks, train systems, and maintain infrastructures that later appear automatic. Smith's old warning returns: efficiency can rise while human development narrows. So the question is not only what machines can do, it is what kind of people the system leaves behind. Smith did not imagine markets without institutions. He believed commercial society required justice. People need protection from fraud, violence, theft, and arbitrary power. Contracts need enforcement. Property needs rules. Public works and education matter because private profit will often fail to provide them fully. Justice is economic infrastructure. A road can carry goods, a bridge can connect markets, a school can protect workers from the narrowing effects of repetitive labor, a court can make exchange trustworthy. This is why the simple version of Smith fails. He was not anti-state in the crude sense. He was anti-capture. He did not want government to become the servant of monopolists. But he also did not imagine a market floating above morality, law, and public responsibility. Markets need referees, and economics needs empathy. The real Adam Smith is more useful than the myth. He was not a cartoon libertarian, not a prophet of greed, not a man who believed every selfish act becomes public good. He was a moral philosopher trying to understand how human beings cooperate, how power corrupts exchange, and how wealth should be judged by the lives people are actually able to live. Before capitalism had a name, Smith saw a world of monopoly, empire, bullion, capture, and privilege. He did not see everything, no one does, but he saw enough to ask a question that still cuts through the noise. Who is the economy really for? If the answer is only merchants, shareholders, empires, platforms, or states, we are back inside the machine he tried to expose. If the answer is ordinary life, then Smith's legacy is not the invisible hand. It is the demand that we look behind every market and ask what hidden system is moving it.